The night my husband threw me out, another woman was standing beside him, and his mother handed me a suitcase as if I had never belonged there. I was holding my 8-month-old daughter when he pointed toward the door and told me to leave. I thought that was the end of my life. I was wrong. The suitcase I carried into the rain contained a secret that would eventually expose my husband and change everything. My name is Diane Mercer. I'd been married to Scott for 15 years, and together we had built a family and helped run his father's company. I knew our marriage had become distant, but I never imagined Scott had already replaced me. That evening, he introduced me to the truth without even saying her name. Vanessa stood beside him while he told me our marriage was over. When I reminded him that the house was mine too, he said his father had paid the down payment and told me to leave. Then Evelyn, his mother, walked in. I expected her to defend me. Instead, she threw an old brown suitcase at my feet. She told me to take my things and go. I left with Lily and drove through the rain. At a gas station, I discovered our joint credit card had been frozen and almost all the money had disappeared from our account. I suddenly realized how little control I had over the life I thought was secure. Then I checked into a hotel. The receptionist told me something strange. A room had already been booked under my name and paid for that afternoon. That night, while Lily slept, I opened the suitcase. Under some old clothes, I found an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a key and a note telling me to check beneath the lining. Behind it was a hidden document pouch. Bank, statements, trust papers, attorney information, and one account with 3 names, Evelyn Mercer, Diane Mercer, Lily Mercer. The balance was over $800,000. Then I found Evelyn's letter. She had discovered Scott's affair weeks earlier, but that was not what frightened her most. Scott had been secretly preparing to sell the family business and had been searching for ownership. Records before I discovered what he was doing. Evelyn had overheard him say everything needed to be cleaned, up before I started asking questions. That was why she had pretended to throw me out. She needed Scott to believe she was on his side. The money belonged to Evelyn and had been placed in a trust to protect me and Lily, but there was another secret. When my attorney examined the company records, we discovered that I owned 30% of Mercer Home and Millwork. Scott owned 40%. His father had owned the other 30%, which later passed to Evelyn. I had spent 15 years helping build that company without realizing I legally owned a third of it. Then, Evelyn gave me a letter from her late husband. He explained that he had deliberately given Scott 40%, me 30%, and kept 30% for himself because he believed I had helped build the company just as much as his son. Scott knew about my ownership. He had simply expected me never to find out. When I refused his settlement offer, he tried to claim that a later restructuring had erased my share. But we found the original bank records. The restructuring had changed financial accounts, not ownership. My 30% was still mine. Then we found emails proving Scott knew. He had been lying. Scott was preparing to sell a company he could not sell without my approval. The final confrontation happened during a meeting with the company buyer. Scott arrived expecting the deal to close. Then I walked into the room. He stared at me. I sat down and said, "I am an owner." My attorney presented the documents. The buyer questioned Scott. Then Evelyn refused to approve the sale. Scott finally realized that his own mother had allowed him to believe she was helping him, so the truth would come out. The buyer also discovered questionable company expenses and undisclosed payments connected to Vanessa. The sale collapsed. Scott followed me outside and asked what I wanted. I told him I wanted a fair divorce, recognition of my ownership, honest financial records, and a secure future for Lily. 11 months later, our divorce was finalized. My 30% was officially recognized. The company continued under outside management, and the sale never happened. I bought a modest house of my own. It was not perfect, but it was mine, and I kept the suitcase. One day, I asked Evelyn why she had protected me. She looked at Lily and said she had spent 15 years watching me take care of everyone, while nobody noticed who was taking care of me. Then she said something I will never forget. "The first night you needed someone to protect you, my son put you outside with a baby." That was when I realized the suitcase had never been a symbol of rejection. It was a lifeline. I thought that night had taken everything from me. Instead, it gave me the courage to take my life back. Scott lost. Control. I found my independence, and the woman he thought he could throw away finally learned that she was never worthless. She had simply forgotten her own value.